Hi, my name is Kyungjun, and on behalf of my colleagues Daisuke Sato, Saki Asakawa, and Chieko Asakawa, and my advisor Hernisa Kacorri, today I'm presenting our exploratory work on head-worn cameras designed for blind people to detect pedestrians. A passersby see proxemic signals such as their presence, distance, position, and head pose can indicate their interest in initiating, accepting, maintaining, terminating, or altogether avoiding social interactions. In these difficult times, blind people's concerns related to social interactions have been intensified. The recent survey initiated by the American Foundation for the Blind showed that more than half of the blind participants expressed their fears related to interacting with people outside. Especially social distancing has been known as a unique challenge and risk for the blind community, as this practice is mostly dependent on visual input. In our work, we specifically look at this inaccessibility of nearby people's proxemics that are highly dependent on visual input but are important for pedestrian detection. We built a test bed on Vue-display smart glasses, which we called GIAccess. It leverages advances in computer vision, such as face detection, to detect nearby people and estimate their spatial behaviors. Every second, GIAccess estimates whether there's anyone nearby, how far and where they are, and whether their head pose indicates that they're looking at the user. For example, if a passerby who is looking at his phone was far from the blind user and located on the left side relative to the user, the system would say, "Person far on the left, not looking at you." Using this prototype testbed, we conducted an in-person user study with 10 blind participants. Gender was balanced among the blind participants, and only 3 of them reported having light perception. Their ages ranged from 49 to 73, with a mean of 63.6 and a standard deviation of 7.6. During the study, each blind participant walked in the hallway 8 times and passed by or interacted with 8 distinct sighted passersby. We collected and analyzed 10 session recording videos captured by a separate stationary camera, blind participants' qualitative feedback on GIAccess, and around 1,700 camera frames from their smart glasses. 2 researchers annotate the camera frames to mark captured body part, position, distance, and head pose of the passersby. Also, they check on which frame the blind participant or sighted passerby were interacting with each other. Let's first look at what and how blind participants capture passersby. This analysis allows us to explore camera aiming behaviors with this form factor, which is an understudied area. First, we analyzed the frames captured when blind participants were approaching sighted passersby. Here we show our result on what body parts are visible in camera frames across participants. There's some small variation, but overall, we find that the camera tends to capture a passerby whole or upper body in more than 80% of the frames. This is really promising, but please note that the hallway in our study is not that wide. On the other hand, if we look at what was being captured when blind participants were interacting with sighted passersby, we find a different story. I'm going to focus here on capturing the head in camera frames, since pedestrian detection typically depends on face detection. We find that while interacting, the camera from some of the participants, such as P3 and P5, did not capture the head in more than 80% of the frames. This could be explained by blind participants' distinct head movements, such as scanning left and right, or facing elsewhere while listening. What about computer vision algorithm that we employed in GIAccess for pedestrian detection? Using F1 score, we evaluate the performance of detection in presence, position, distance, and head pose. We see that the results for the position and head pose estimation are promising when the pedestrian's faces are detected. In contrast, we see a room for improvement for the presence and distance estimation. The relatively low performance may be due to our design choice, which makes these estimations dependent on the face detection. We believe that adding proximity sensors or detecting other body parts for presence detection may help provide these estimations more accurately. In the rest of this presentation, I will share blind participants' qualitative feedback on GIAccess, which designers and researchers can consider in their future work. 7 out of 10 blind participants specifically like having access to proxemic signals of passersby. For example, P4 mentioned, I like having the proxemic information. That means a lot when I know that there's a person or how close they are to me or where they are. It's a good thing to be able to know who's there and that there's somebody. They think it's important to access to this visual information because people sometimes are quiet, which makes it difficult for blind people to perceive their presence. However, some pointed out that such visual information is mostly inaccessible in their daily lives, so they are not yet familiar with using this information. P9 said, it's visual feedback that I'm not used to. I never functions with, so I'm not used to processing or analyzing things in a visual way. I love details, but I just never often think about visual information related to the people. Seeing this feedback, we suspect that using such visual information might require additional training, as mentioned by some of our blind participants. As discussed before, our system did not work sometimes because of errors in visual estimate. To minimize the error effect, 6 participants mentioned aggregating multiple estimates from the system instead of relying on a singular estimate. P9 specifically said, if the visual information is not what I felt, either incorrect or not certain, I would wait and give the system a chance to focus better or to process it differently. However, blind participants pointed out that there would be no guaranteed way for them to verify the visual estimate. Regarding this issue, P10 commented, unless someone was there listening to the same thing I was listening to and tell me if it was right or wrong, I had to depend on it. That is, the error detection in visual estimates is currently inaccessible to blind people, although machine learning models are shown to be error prone. We urge researchers to work towards accessible explainability and human error interactions. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take questions.